name is Jennifer, and I'm coming to you from my home in Brooklyn, New York. And this is our fifth video, our fifth installment, the fifth element that we'll be exploring as part of our home movement practice. And that's the space element, akasha. So the space element we can think about in lots of different ways. Space is, in a way, the container for all of the other elements. So far we've come into the earth element with grounding and our foundational poses, the water element and moving through flow and getting some circulation in the joints, the fire element with our standing postures, a little bit more heat and activation in the muscles, and the air element in our sense of breath, our sense of balancing and inversions that can help us get a bit of movement into the body. So our last section, the space element, will really be focusing on kind of turning inwards. It's a more of a winding down part of the practice, and we'll focus on three main elements of the winding down series, which are back bends, forward folds or kind of seated postures, and shavasana, our final relaxation. So starting with our back bends, we'll explore just a few different versions to come into back bend. So let's start with belly back bend, so the prone back bend. So we'll come to lie down on the belly. And here there are a couple of different ways to move into it. We've already done things like Sphinx pose and upward facing dog, which are both back bends. We might not think of them in a kind of official back bending way, but obviously, as you can see, the back is an extension, so we're in a sense of back bend there. Shalambhasana or locust pose is a very typical belly back bend. So one of my favorite ways to do it is to bring the forehead to the hands with the elbows wide to the side. Then you press into the tops of the feet, lift the knees, and lift the head, neck, and chest. The forehead stays glued to the head. The forehead stays glued to the hand. And as you breathe here, you can really feel the widening of the side since the front of the belly is a little bit constricted. And then you could bring your arms out to the side in a cactus and lower down. You can also do Shalambhasana from that cactus position, lifting straight up and lower. And then another version of a back bend here is Dhanurasana bow pose. I like to set up with Dhanurasana with a couple of preparatory moves. So I start by just lifting the legs. So the knees are bent, the feet are up, the feet are flexed, and you lift the thighs. Really feeling the activation on the back of the legs. Then I come back with my arms and just lift the head, neck, and chest. So we're feeling a sense of spaciousness in the front of the chest. And then we incorporate the two. So lift the chest, lift the legs, and then you can find the feet with your hands. And I think of the space element when it comes to back bends because we're actually carving around negative space. So you can kind of see here this U shape, this kind of bowl that I'm creating. And I imagine my breath filling that space, inhaling and exhale. And then to release, you try not to ricochet as you come down. And then you can come back to a child's pose. And then we'll come to some supine back bends, so lying on the back. I'll have my block for this, so I'll show a supported bridge pose and an active bridge pose. So supported bridge is a lovely way to end your practice, and you can stay here for kind of a really long time. So supported bridge just means the block is under the pelvis. It could be any facet. I have it at the medium facet today, which I find is a little bit of it's a middle ground between being just more focused on grounding, which you would do at the lower facet, and then really kind of arching the back heavily, which is almost the same as an active bridge pose in the higher position. So I like the medium position if I'm going to hold it for a long period of time. When you're in the supported back bend, you can sometimes, if the block is on the lowest facet and you did a lot of work in the hips, you can also stretch the legs. And again, feel the sense of negative space underneath you. An active bridge pose would just be feet on the ground, pressing into the hands and the arms, and lifting the seat up you can interlace the hands underneath you, getting a bit more space underneath the back. And then lowering down, one vertebra at a time. It's nice to neutralize the spine after those back bends, so allowing the natural curves to come back to the low back. So pulling one knee into the chest at a time. You might incorporate a little twist in between. And then you'll do the other side. So twisting really helps to counter the action of the back bend in the spine. So that's our back bends. Then we can come into some forward folding positions. And forward folds can be pretty active sometimes, but for today we'll explore some softer forward folds. So we'll look at a version of Tarasana star pose. And in Tarasana, I'll actually sit up on a pillow to encourage the sense of space. So sitting up on a pillow in any seated position or some folded blankets will help to elevate the hips, make some more space for the low back. In this posture, there's space between the heels and the pubic bone. So rather than a kind of tight Baddha Konasana, there's a little bit more distance. And I like to take my block. If you have two blocks at home or need a little bit more height, you can take two blocks, stack them on top of one another. Let the hands come to the ankles or the shins, and then really just round forward, letting the head come to the support of the block. So even though I can kind of reach all the way down there, I am going to turn my block a little bit higher to really encourage more space in this kind of cavity that's here between my chest and the ground. And here I can feel a spreading of my back body, spreading of my rib cage and the backs of my lungs. And in this space between my chest and the ground, I can start to turn a little bit more inward. I can come back to my intention and allow some of the external stimuli to start to move away. So this is where we also like to begin to practice pratyahara, or withdrawal of the senses. You can think of it almost as making a space, kind of bubble around yourself. So that's a very nice hip stretch, forward fold, very grounding energy. So you'll find that in these final postures, we're also kind of cycling back to that ground, that earth element that we started with. So things come full circle in a really beautiful way. So that's a forward fold variation. And of course, there are many more that you can explore. And then finally, for Shavasana corpse pose, what I'm going to do is demonstrate a pretty simple setup for Shavasana that's supportive for many bodies, and even if it doesn't address a specific injury or condition that you have, it is a nice way to support the self after a movement practice of any kind. So what you'll do is take a pillow or a blanket or a bolster and set it on the ground. You could also set up two yoga blocks if that's accessible to you. You'll take a rolled blanket and place it over that, and then set up with your knees over the blanket roll and the props. So you have a good bit of support behind the knees, and then you'll come to lie down with your arms by your sides and your chest nice and open. The palms can be up or down, whatever feels more comfortable to you, or they can be even on your body. And Shavasana is perhaps one of the hardest poses in yoga in general, but it's also difficult in a home practice, especially because after you get through all of your movement, when you land in this place of quiet, all the other busyness of your life can start to be even more apparent. Sometimes when you're at a yoga studio, you can at least kind of maintain that separation for the few minutes of Shavasana. But if you're in your home and it's harder to separate, having this space at the end of your practice is more challenging, but also even more vital. So what I like to do for Shavasana is if I'm listening to music, I'll have a song that I know is my Shavasana song, and I'll let it play through so that I know that I'm getting at least 5 minutes of rest. 5 to 7 minutes is a great frame for Shavasana, but you can stay as long as you like. You can also set a timer so that you feel that you get enough space. Let the ring on the timer be something that's easeful. And as you rest here, one way to use your visualization to encourage the sense of spaciousness is to imagine your body sinking on the backside. So coming back to the earth element. And feel your breath expanding up and around. So a lightening quality above, heavy in quality below. And we're trying to increase the space between those two. So that your focus, your attention, your sense of being is held from below and from above between this kind of huge expanse of a bubble of the elements around you. You might find the spaces between the breaths also increases. It's in those spaces between the breath, between the thoughts, it's where we can come into surrender. One of the meanings of Shavasana. Once you've gotten your full rest in, you can bring movement to your fingers and toes, gently coming back into the physical shape that your body is. Drawing your knees to your chest, roll over to your side, and again, pause here, making space between relaxation and the rest of your practice off of your mat. And then pressing yourself up to a comfortable seat. You can come back to your Sukhasana. And at the end of our practice, it can be nice to sit for a few moments of seated meditation. You can also do seated meditation instead of Shavasana, although it's nice to kind of have both. It's nice to rest the body in addition to coming into the mind, which is really when we think about the chakras, the 6th and 7th chakra are really the things that bring us out and above. So accessing the space element that way through seated meditation. We can also access space element with our final chanting, our final mantra of Om. The vibration, the sense of sound is what is associated with the space element. So in sounding our voices with this universal sound, we not only close our practice, but also begin again a new cycle. So in the same way that space and earth kind of cycle back into each other, the vibration that we started practice cycles back to the vibration at the end of practice, which just allows us to visualize a continuation of the work that we do onto our mat into the rest of our home space. So honoring the end of your practice with this rest, with a few moments of silence and with a vibration can really help to bring a sense of cohesiveness to your space in many ways. So we'll do that all together to bring all of it home. So bring your hands to your heart, let your thumbs rest into your breastbone, connecting Ida and Pingala Nadi, balancing the sun and the moon energy, reconnecting to your intention, that anchor in your heart. Take an easy breath in, an easy breath out. Inhale for Om. Bow your mind brain to your heart brain, surrendering to the wisdom of your inner teacher. Thank yourself for taking time for your practice, and wish yourself namaste. Namaste to you all, friends. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy all 5 of these elements in your practice, whether it's on your mat or off your mat. So have a wonderful rest of your day and enjoy your practice.